I'm standing in my own driveway, certified letter in my hand, reading it 3 times because I cannot believe what it says. A lien on my house. Not a warning, not a mistake. A legal claim filed at the courthouse by a contractor I never hired, never spoke to, never saw in my life. I drive straight to the HOA office, put the letter on Patricia Voigt's desk. She looks at it, looks at me, and says,
"This doesn't concern you directly."
It's on my property. How is it not my concern?
She slides the letter back. The board is handling it. You don't need to be involved. My house. My name on that lien. And she's telling me to stay out of it. What she didn't know, what she had completely forgotten, was that her own HOA had already signed a document that made this lien worthless from the day it was filed. She told me not to get involved. That was the last decision she ever made as board president. What would you do? Drop where you're watching from. Let me back up and tell you who I am, because it matters. My name is Darnell Whitfield, 54 years old, retired pipe fitter out of Greensboro, North Carolina. 28 years working shutdowns at chemical plants across the Southeast. The kind of job where if you skip a step in the manual, someone gets hurt. Where the difference between a safe valve and a failed one is whether somebody actually read the spec sheet. I am not a dramatic man. I don't look for fights. I don't go to HOA meetings to grandstand. I go because I believe if you live somewhere, you show up, you pay attention, you read what they put in front of you. I bought my house in Millbrook Crossing 12 years ago. Corner lot, brick exterior, south-facing garden along the fence line, where I grow tomatoes and collard greens every summer. Flagpole out front that I maintain like it's my second job. It's a good house in a quiet neighborhood. 340 homes, curved streets, matching mailboxes, the whole thing. The kind of place that smells like cut grass and dryer sheets on a Saturday morning, where the sprinklers kick on at 7 and the only sound is a distant leaf blower 2 streets over. HOA dues were $185 a month. I set up autopay the day I moved in. Never missed one. Not once in 12 years. Now, let me tell you about Patricia Voigt. Patricia is 61 years old, retired from a mid-level HR position at a regional insurance company. She has been HOA board president for 6 consecutive years, and she runs Millbrook Crossing the way some people run small countries, with a lot of rules, very little accountability, and absolutely no tolerance for questions she didn't invite. She sends certified letters about trash cans left out past 7 p.m. She has strong opinions about holiday lighting windows. She wears a lanyard to community meetings. A lanyard. To a neighborhood meeting. In a clubhouse. But here's the thing about Patricia that goes beyond annoying. There's a pattern. Documented in board meeting minutes, whispered about at mailboxes, never quite confronted directly. Of her directing HOA contracts to vendors she has personal relationships with. No competitive bidding. No transparency. Just Patricia deciding, and the board voting 3-2. And that being the end of it. 8 months before that certified letter landed in my mailbox, Patricia signed a grounds maintenance contract with a company called Brightway Grounds LLC. $42,000 for resodding the community entrance, new irrigation at the pool, and perimeter fence trimming. The owner of Brightway Grounds was a man named Tad Crenshaw, Patricia's former brother-in-law. I was at that board meeting. I raised my hand. I asked to see the other bids. The competitive quotes that are supposed to justify a contract that size. Patricia looked at me the way she looks at trash cans left out past 7, and said the board was satisfied with the vetting process. Then she moved on. Brightway Grounds showed up. Did about $11,000 worth of work. Mediocre work. The kind where you can tell the sod wasn't properly watered in. Edges cut like someone was in a hurry. Then Tad Crenshaw and Patricia had a falling out. Nobody on the street knows exactly why. There are theories. What everyone knows is this. Brightway stopped showing up. The HOA, now in a politically awkward situation, refused to pay the remaining $31,000 balance. So Tad Crenshaw did what any unpaid contractor in North Carolina can legally do. He filed a mechanics lien, not against the HOA's bank account, not against Patricia personally, against the properties in the subdivision. 63 of them, including mine. The day after I got that letter, I called the HOA management company, Pinnacle Property Services, the third-party firm that handles billing and communications for Millbrook Crossing. I explained the lien. I gave them the filing number. I spelled out exactly what I was holding. The rep said he'd escalate it to the board. I called back 4 days later. Voicemail. I left a message that was polite but precise. I need a written explanation of how a contractor lien ended up on my personal property, and I need it within 5 business days. I sent the same request 3 ways. Email to Pinnacle, certified letter to Pinnacle, certified letter to Patricia Vogt at the address listed in the HOA's public filings. Those certified letters going into the mail slot at the post office made a sound I still remember. Thunk, 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 like the first moves in a chess game. Patricia's response came 8 days later. Not a phone call, not an explanation. A mailer, sent to all 340 homes in Millbrook Crossing, informing residents that the HOA was in negotiations with a former vendor regarding a contractual dispute, and that homeowners should not be alarmed. She did not use the word lien. She did not mention that 63 properties were currently encumbered. She called it a billing disagreement being actively managed. Her name was at the bottom. The HOA logo was at the top. And it was the single most deliberately misleading document I had seen since a plant supervisor once tried to slide a faulty valve inspection past me back in 2009. I kept the mailer. I put it in a folder. I labeled the folder. Around this same time, my nephew Jerome came to visit. Jerome Whitfield, paralegal at a real estate firm in Raleigh, sharp as they come. He drove up on a Saturday morning, and we sat at my kitchen table with coffee I ordered from a roaster in Asheville. Dark and slightly smoky, the kind that actually wakes you up. Jerome opened his laptop and pulled up the North Carolina Mechanics Lien statutes, specifically Chapter 44A of the North Carolina General Statutes. He walked me through the key mechanism. In North Carolina, a contractor who performs work on behalf of an HOA on common areas does not automatically have lien rights against individual homeowners' private property. Lien rights attach to the specific property where the work was performed. If Brightway Grounds sodded the community entrance, which is HOA common area, then the lien should attach to the common area, not to my personal parcel, not to my corner lot. This is not a gray area. This is statute. Takeaway. In North Carolina and many other states, a mechanic's lien must attach to the specific property that was improved, not to nearby or associated parcels owned by unrelated third parties. I felt something loosen in my chest when Jerome said that. But then he kept reading. He pulled the actual lien filing from the Guilford County Register of Deeds online portal, read through it, then read it again. Then he looked up at me with the expression I've learned to recognize as his "this is bad" and also interesting face. "Darnell," he said, "Crenshaw's attorney filed a blanket lien. One filing, one legal description referencing the entire subdivision plat, covering all 340 properties simultaneously. It was aggressive, arguably improper, but not impossible to attempt. A determined attorney could argue that because HOA dues from all homeowners fund the HOA's ability to pay contractors, all homeowners benefited from the work, and therefore, all properties are subject to the lien. It's a stretch, but a stretch with teeth, because until it gets challenged and dismissed in court, it sits on every title in the neighborhood, like a storm cloud that won't move. The morning light was coming through my kitchen window at a low angle, throwing long shadows across the lien document on the table. Jerome circled the legal description in red pen. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I did what I always do when a problem is bigger than I expected. I filed a formal records request. Under North Carolina's Planned Community Act, Chapter 47F, HOA members have a legal right to inspect financial records related to HOA operations. I requested everything connected to the Brightway Grounds contract: invoices, board meeting minutes, payment history, the contract itself, internal correspondence. I hand-delivered the request to Patricia Vogt's front door. She opened it. I handed her the envelope. I said, "I'll need all of this within 10 business days." She said, "You'll get what you're entitled to." I said, "I know I will." I turned and walked back to my truck. The gravel of her driveway crunched under my boots all the way to the street. 9 business days later, Patricia produced a document package. Partial. Redacted. Missing 3 pages from the original Brightway Grounds contract, specifically the payment schedule and the dispute resolution clause. What she did include came with a cover letter explaining that certain financial documents are being reviewed by counsel and will be provided when appropriate. when appropriate, for records I was legally entitled to request, about a lien on my own property. I added the cover letter to the folder. I labeled it Obstruction, Attempt 1. Jerome filed a complaint with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. We also notified the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division that a planned community HOA may be withholding records in violation of Chapter 47F. Neither of these moves cost $1. Both of them created an official paper trail involving two state agencies, entities with actual enforcement authority over HOAs in North Carolina. Takeaway: most states have planned community or condominium acts that give homeowners a legally enforceable right to inspect HOA financial records. Filing a state complaint is free and immediately creates official documentation of the violation. While Jerome was filing, the neighborhood was waking up. Word travels fast in a subdivision of 340 homes. Not because I was broadcasting anything. I was deliberately quiet, methodical, keeping my head down. But Jerome had mentioned the lien to a friend. That friend mentioned it at a cookout, and within 3 weeks there were 40 homeowners who knew their titles were clouded. People were calling their mortgage lenders. At least 3 families discovered that their title insurance policies, purchased when they originally bought their homes, might not cover liens filed after closing. The HOA Facebook group, which usually features lost dog posts and heated debate about approved mulch colors, now had a thread with over 200 comments. Patricia posted in the group that misinformation is circulating and urged residents to direct questions only to official HOA channels. The comments on her post were not kind. Then one morning, I'm out checking my garden. The collards are coming in thick, that particular deep green smell of leaves in the early fall, dew still on everything. And a woman walks up to my fence line and says, simply, "I've been watching what you're doing. I want to help." Her name was Carolyn Dupree. 67 years old, retired school teacher, lived in Millbrook Crossing since the subdivision opened. She had served on the HOA board for 4 years before Patricia consolidated her majority and effectively pushed her out. Carolyn had watched Patricia operate for a long time, and she had done something smart. She kept records. She handed me a manila folder thick enough to stop a door. 8 years of board meeting minutes. Every vote, every contract approval. Every 3-2 decision where Patricia's side always happened to benefit someone Patricia knew personally. I took it inside. Made 3 copies immediately. Kept one at the house, sent one to Jerome's office in Raleigh, locked one in a safe deposit box at my bank. I learned redundancy from pipework. You never run one line where 2 will fit. Around the same time, a letter arrived from August Phipps, the Greensboro attorney representing Brightway Grounds, LLC. The letter was addressed to every lien-encumbered homeowner, and it was designed to terrify. It contained phrases like judicial foreclosure proceedings and enforcement of lien rights through legal action. It was printed on heavy cream paper, mailed in a window envelope, formatted to feel overwhelming and official. Several neighbors called me in a panic that week. One woman was crying. A retired couple 2 streets over told me they hadn't slept properly since they got their copy. These were people who had done nothing wrong. People who paid their dues every month and took care of their properties and had no idea that a contractor dispute they had zero involvement in could reach through their mailbox and threaten their homes. I told every one of them the same thing. Don't sign anything. Don't pay anything. Don't call Phipps back. Give me 2 weeks. I didn't say that with bravado. I said it because by that point, I had Jerome's statutory analysis, Carolyn's 8 years of board minutes, 2 active state agency complaints, and a very clear sense that the lien Patricia had allowed to land on my property was built on a foundation that was already starting to crack. I just needed to find exactly where to push. I hired an attorney. Her name was Sybil Tran, real estate lawyer based in Greensboro, 44 years old, specializing in construction and HOA law. Jerome recommended her. I called her on a Monday morning, explained the situation in about 8 minutes, and she said, "Send me everything you have." I sent her everything. 48 hours later, she called me back. She had reviewed the Brightway Grounds contract, the lien filing, Jerome's statutory analysis, and a selection of Carolyn's board minutes. Her assessment was direct. The lien against individual homeowners was legally shaky. To get it removed, they would need to either bond around it, file a motion to discharge it, or find a procedural defect in the lien filing itself. She started looking for the defect. She found it in 3 days. North Carolina's mechanics lien statute has strict timing requirements. A contractor must file a claim of lien within 120 days of the last date they furnished labor or materials to the project. Sybil pulled the Brightway Grounds job logs, the ones I had obtained through the records request, and cross-referenced them with the lien filing date at the Register of Deeds. Brightway's last documented day of work on site, March 14th. Date the lien was filed, July 18th. That is 126 days. 6 days past the statutory deadline. The lien, all of them, all 340, might be void on its face. Takeaway. Mechanics liens are time-sensitive legal filings. A single day past the statutory deadline can render the entire lien unenforceable, regardless of whether the underlying debt is legitimate. But Sybil being Sybil, she immediately told me the complication. A motion to discharge in court would take 3 to 6 months. Tad Crenshaw's attorney could file an amended lien, or argue that a later materials delivery restarted the clock. And there was a work order in the file, a $340 sod patch delivery dated April 4th, that muddied the timeline just enough to give Phipps something to argue with. She said, "The timing issue is real, but let me look at the original contract before we move." While Sybil was reading contracts, Patricia was making moves. She approached 3 homeowners privately, people with larger properties and, she apparently assumed, more to lose. She proposed a quiet, special assessment, $92 per household, collected outside the normal budget process, used to pay off the Brightway balance and make the whole problem disappear before it became a public crisis. No board vote, no community notice, no transparency. One of the homeowners she approached was Rhett Borland. Rhett is 58, semi-retired electrician, lived in Millbrook Crossing for 11 years. He has the build of a man who has been moving heavy things his whole life, and the patience of someone who has rewired enough old houses to know that shortcuts always cost more in the end. He has exactly 0 tolerance for backroom arrangements. He called me within an hour of Patricia leaving his driveway, told me everything she'd said. I asked him one thing. "Can you keep talking to her and document it?" He said, "Already ahead of you." Rhett bought a small digital voice recorder from an electronics store the next morning. Nothing elaborate. Under North Carolina's one-party consent law, a participant in a conversation can legally record it without informing the other party. Rhett was a participant. Whatever Patricia said to him going forward was now on the record. That same week, Patricia called a community forum, technically an informational session, not a formal board meeting, at the Millbrook Crossing Clubhouse, Thursday evening. She sent notices to all 340 homes. About 90 homeowners showed up. The room smelled like coffee that had been sitting in a pump pot for 2 hours too long, and the faint chemical sweetness of carpet cleaner. Folding chairs scraped on the floor as people settled in. Patricia stood at the front with a laptop connected to a pull-down projection screen, and she delivered a presentation she had clearly prepared carefully. She used the phrase "unforeseen vendor dispute" 4 times. She did not mention the statutory deadline issue. She did not mention the private special assessment conversations. She did not mention the state agency complaints. When she opened the floor for questions, I raised my hand. She looked at me for just a moment longer than she needed to. Then she nodded. I stood up. I asked her to confirm, for the record, and in front of everyone in that room, the exact date the Brightway Grounds contract was executed. She said October 2nd. I asked her to confirm the date the last work was performed on site. She paused, said she would need to check her records. I said, "I've checked mine." Then I sat down. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. The room was very quiet, and Patricia's expression had changed in a way that everyone present would remember later. The night before that community forum, Sybil Tran had called me. She had found something. Buried in Section 14C of the original Brightway Grounds contract, the full version, not the redacted copy Patricia had initially provided, was a lien waiver clause. Standard language in construction contracts, but language that changes everything when you actually read it. It said this: upon receipt of each progress payment, the contractor agrees to provide the HOA with a partial lien waiver, releasing all lien rights with respect to work and materials covered by that payment. Upon final payment, the contractor provides a full and final lien waiver, releasing all lien rights whatsoever. The HOA had made one payment to Brightway Grounds, $11,000, the first progress payment, and when Tad Crenshaw cashed that check, he had signed and delivered a partial lien waiver. Standard industry practice, the kind of document that gets signed without much ceremony because everyone assumes the job will finish and the final payment will follow. It didn't follow. The job fell apart, and Crenshaw filed a lien for the remaining $31,000, the balance he claimed he was owed for work he was prepared to perform but had not yet performed. In North Carolina, a mechanic's lien cannot be filed for work not yet completed, and the partial lien waiver Crenshaw had already signed covered all lien rights for work done to date. Sybil sat with this for a moment on the phone, and then she said, in the dry, even tone of someone who has won cases before and recognizes what winning looks like, "This lien is a house of cards. We just need to decide how we want to knock it down. I want to make sure this is clear, because this is the pivot point of everything that follows. A lien waiver is a document a contractor signs that surrenders their right to file a mechanic's lien against a property. When a contractor accepts a progress payment, they routinely sign a partial lien waiver covering the work paid for. Tad Crenshaw accepted $11,000 from the HOA. He signed the waiver. That waiver released his lien rights for all completed work, and since Brightway never performed the remaining work, there was nothing left to lien. Takeaway: always require a signed lien waiver when making any payment to a contractor. It is the single most powerful protection against future lien claims, and it is standard practice that contractors expect. The lien wasn't just potentially void because of the 120-day timing issue. It was almost certainly invalid because it was filed for work that was never performed, against the backdrop of a signed contractual release covering all completed work. 2 layers, 2 independent grounds to kill the same lien. I stood in my kitchen after Sybil's call and looked at the folder on my table, the one I'd been adding documents to for weeks. The lien notice on top, the certified mail receipts underneath, Carolyn's board minutes, Jerome's statutory analysis, the redacted contract Patricia had first provided, and the full contract Sybil had now obtained. It had all been there, every piece of it. Patricia had signed a contract that contained the clause that would undo her contractor's lien. Tad Crenshaw had signed a waiver that surrendered his rights before he even knew he'd need them, and nobody had bothered to read any of it carefully enough. Until now. Saturday morning, my kitchen table, 4 people. Me, Jerome, Sybil, Carolyn, who had arrived first, and already filled 2 pages of a yellow legal pad before anyone else sat down. The coffee was strong. Carolyn had brought a box of pastries from a bakery on Battleground Avenue that she visits every Saturday, regardless of circumstances. And the smell of them, warm butter and something with cinnamon, filled the kitchen while Sybil spread her documents across the table, and Jerome pulled up the Guilford County Register of Deeds portal on his laptop. Sybil had printed a clean timeline, key dates highlighted in yellow. March 14th, last documented work performed. April 4th, disputed sod patch delivery. July 18th, lien filing date. The date of the $11,000 progress payment. The date Tad Crenshaw signed the partial lien waiver. Every date that mattered, laid out in sequence, clean and irrefutable. We were building a legal case, but we were also building something else. A sequence of moves designed not just to win, but to win visibly, publicly, on the record, in a way that Patricia Vogt could not quietly absorb and recover from. Sybil outlined the 3-front attack. First, she would file a motion to discharge the mechanic's lien in Guilford County Superior Court. Grounds: the lien was filed 126 days after the last documented work, 6 days past the 120-day statutory deadline, and the partial lien waiver, signed by Tad Crenshaw upon receipt of the progress payment, constituted a contractual release of all lien rights for completed work. The motion would attach both documents as exhibits. If granted, and Sybil believed it would be, the discharge would void the lien against all 340 properties simultaneously, because they were all filed under the same legal description. Second, I would file a formal complaint with the North Carolina HOA Ombudsman, established under Chapter 47F, citing Patricia's failure to timely disclose the liens to homeowners and her unilateral attempt to negotiate a special assessment without a board vote. Both were documented violations of the community's bylaws and state law. Third, Carolyn, working with two other former board members she had stayed in contact with, would formally petition for a special board election to remove Patricia as president. The petition required signatures from a percentage of homeowners, with 118 already signed onto the community letter supporting the motion to discharge. The signature threshold was not going to be a problem. Three fronts: legal, regulatory, and political, all moving simultaneously. Sybil also explained a parallel financial strategy, something called bonding around the lien. A property owner can substitute a surety bond for the liened property, which frees the title immediately while the legal dispute continues in court. For a $31,000 lien, the bond premium runs roughly 1 to 3% of the lien amount, around $300 to $900 total. I organized a pool of 8 homeowners. Each contributed $125. The title company processed the bond within a week. 8 families had clean titles again before the court hearing was even scheduled. Takeaway: bonding around a mechanic's lien is a faster and often cheaper alternative to waiting for a court discharge. It removes the cloud on your title immediately, while the legal fight continues on a separate track. Then there was the media piece. Carolyn had a former student, a woman she had taught 7th grade English to 20 years ago, who was now a segment producer at WFMY News 2 in Greensboro. Carolyn made a phone call. The producer was interested. HOA overreach stories perform well with their audience, and 63 encumbered homeowners in a single subdivision is not a small story. A reporter was assigned. I agreed to a brief on-camera interview. I was not interested in performing outrage for a camera. I wanted to be the calm man in the room, while everything around me unraveled for the right reasons. The interview was scheduled for the week before the court hearing. That timing was not accidental. Finally, Sybil raised one more potential weapon. If the motion to discharge succeeded and the court found the lien was filed without legal basis, we might have a claim for slander of title against Brightway Grounds LLC. Slander of title applies when someone knowingly or recklessly files a false lien against a property, causing the owner demonstrable harm. Damages can include attorney's fees, bonding costs, and any financial losses directly caused by the encumbrance. Takeaway: slander of title is a real legal claim that can shift attorney's fees and damages back onto a contractor who files a fraudulent or legally baseless mechanic's lien. Rhett Borland delivered his recording to Sybil that same afternoon. She listened to it twice. Patricia's voice, thin through the small speaker, said clearly, "If we handle this between us before the next board meeting, I think we can avoid a lot of public complications." Carolyn wrote something on her legal pad and underlined it twice. I didn't ask what she wrote. I didn't need to. When Sybil filed the motion to discharge in Guilford County Superior Court, it became a public record within 24 hours. August Phipps received a copy via process service 2 days after that. Whatever phone call followed between Phipps and Patricia, the result was visible. Within 72 hours, Patricia called an emergency board meeting, video only, no in-person attendance, and voted, with her 3-person majority, to hire outside legal counsel for the HOA to respond to ongoing litigation. She did not disclose that the litigation was, in part, about her own conduct. She did not mention the ombudsman complaint. She did not mention Rhett's recording. She billed the legal retainer to the HOA General Fund. Every homeowner in Millbrook Crossing was now paying to defend the woman who had created the problem they were all living with. I added that board meeting notice to the folder. 2 weeks before the court hearing, something else started happening. Anonymous posts appeared on a neighborhood next door thread, not the official HOA Facebook group, but a parallel community page, suggesting that I had a personal vendetta against the board and was trying to avoid paying my fair share of community expenses. The posts were unsigned, but the phrasing was recognizable to anyone paying attention. The repeated use of unforeseen vendor dispute, the particular way certain sentences were constructed. Carolyn screenshotted everything within hours. Jerome noted that IP metadata, if subpoenaed, could be useful. We didn't act on it immediately. We noted it, stored it, and kept moving. I have learned that the worst thing you can do when someone is trying to rattle you is let them see it working. Then Patricia made a direct mistake. She called Sybil Tran's law office. Sybil, ethically required to speak with anyone who contacts her, took the call. Patricia implied that if Sybil's client would stand down from the motion, the HOA would consider compensating me directly for my inconvenience. Sybil said, in a tone that communicated precisely nothing about what she was thinking. "I'll pass that along to my client." She hung up, called me, said, "They just offered you money to go away." I said, "Good." Sybil filed a supplemental declaration in the court record documenting the contact. It was not a criminal bribe, but it was exactly the kind of documented moment that, when read aloud in a courtroom, makes everyone quietly look at the floor. The smear posts and the backroom offer had an unintended effect. They made people pay attention. The community Facebook group, already agitated, became a referendum. There was a tense week where a handful of homeowners who didn't know me personally started to wonder if this was really my fight or everyone's. I stayed quiet. I didn't post. I didn't respond to anything publicly. Then Rhett Borland posted. Rhett is not a subtle man, and he did not write a subtle post. It said, "My name is Rhett Borland. I have lived here 11 years. Patricia Vogt came to my house and asked me to agree to a secret special assessment. Money collected outside any board vote without notifying the community. I recorded the conversation. I gave the recording to our attorney. Ask me anything." 147 comments in 6 hours. The tide turned fast, and it turned hard. Within a week, 118 homeowners had signed the community letter supporting the motion to discharge and calling for a special board election. Carolyn filed the election petition the following Monday morning, with signatures attached. Patricia responded to none of it publicly. Her silence at this point was its own kind of answer. What I noticed during those weeks, and what I want to be honest about, is that none of this felt triumphant while it was happening. It felt like work. Careful, deliberate, unglamorous work. Phone calls and document requests and certified mail and folders with labels. The satisfaction wasn't in any single moment. It was in watching a structure built on shortcuts and assumptions begin to meet something it hadn't encountered before: preparation. The thing about people who abuse small amounts of power is that they rely almost entirely on the other person not doing their homework. They expect frustration and confusion and eventually surrender. They are not prepared for someone who reads every document, files every complaint, copies every record, and shows up to every proceeding. Patricia had 6 years of practice running a neighborhood. I had 28 years of practice not cutting corners. August Phipps filed an amended lien claim 10 days before the hearing. It was a Hail Mary, and everyone in our group recognized it as one. He argued that the April 4th sod patch delivery, $340 worth of materials, constituted a separate furnishing event that restarted the 120-day statutory clock. Under that math, the lien would have been filed within the window. He also argued that the partial lien waiver covered only the first $11,000 of completed work, not the anticipated remaining balance of $31,000. Sybil had expected this. She had prepared the response before the amended claim was even filed. She cited 3 North Carolina appellate decisions establishing that a partial lien waiver covering all work and materials furnished to date at the time of signing extinguishes lien rights for all completed work, and that a contractor cannot file a lien for work they were hired to perform but did not perform. The $340 sod delivery did not restart the clock because it was incidental materials, not a new scope of work, and the waiver language was unambiguous. She filed the response in 4 days. Clean, documented, sourced. While the legal back and forth continued, I was doing what I had been doing since the beginning, building the documentation. Jerome and I had been pulling public records from the Guilford County Register of Deeds, going back 5 years. We found that Brightway Grounds, LLC, had filed mechanics liens in 3 other subdivisions in Guilford and Forsyth counties during that period. 2 had been dismissed. 1 had resulted in a quiet settlement, a homeowners association that paid a reduced amount rather than fight. A pattern of filing aggressive liens and waiting to see who flinched. I gave all of it to Sybil. She noted it in her case file and identified 2 of the prior dismissals as potentially relevant precedent. The WFMY segment aired on a Tuesday evening. 4 minutes. I stood in my driveway in a clean shirt, and I spoke in plain English about what a mechanic's lien is, how 63 homeowners were affected, and why I believed the lien had no legal foundation. The reporter noted that the HOA board president had declined to comment. The segment closed with the date of the upcoming court hearing. By the following morning, the story had been picked up by a Greensboro newspaper and shared in 3 regional HOA watchdog groups on Facebook, with a combined membership of over 40,000 people. My phone ran warm for 2 days. Phipps filed a motion to continue the hearing, requesting a postponement, citing incomplete discovery. He needed more time because he was out of good arguments, and hoping a delay would wear us down. Sybil opposed it. The judge reviewed the motion and noted that all relevant documents had been provided in the original filing, and that a continuance would impose ongoing financial harm on encumbered homeowners. She denied the motion. The hearing stayed on the calendar. 3 days before the hearing, Phipps sent a letter to Sybil offering to voluntarily dismiss all liens against individual homeowner properties in exchange for a full release of all counterclaims, including the slander of title claim and all pending regulatory complaints against Patricia Vogt and the HOA. It was a white flag dressed in legal language, a settlement offer that would make the lien go away, but let Patricia walk away clean. Sybil brought it to my kitchen table. Jerome and Carolyn were both on the phone. I read the letter, set it down between the coffee cups. I said, "If we take this, Patricia walks." Nobody spoke for about 5 seconds. Then I said, "Tell them no, we'll see them in court." I want to explain that decision, because it wasn't about pride. It wasn't about wanting a bigger win. It was about the 18 other homeowners in that neighborhood who had not been part of our group, who didn't know Jerome or Sybil, who had spent weeks not sleeping well because a lien they had no control over was sitting on the homes they had worked their whole lives to own. A private settlement with a confidentiality clause would have cleared our titles. It would not have created a public court record. It would not have triggered the contractor licensing review. It would not have produced a written judicial finding that the lien board at the AG's office could reference. Some fights are worth finishing in public. Guilford County Superior Court, 3rd floor, high ceilings, oak paneling, the smell of old paper and recycled air. I arrived in a suit I had bought for my daughter's high school graduation and hadn't worn since. Jerome was there. Carolyn was there, in a cardigan and her reading glasses, yellow legal pad already in hand. Rhett Borland was there, in a clean button-down and pressed jeans, which is as formal as Rhett gets, and I respected it. 11 other Millbrook Crossing homeowners sat in the gallery behind us. The WFMY reporter was in the hallway. August Phipps sat at the defense table with his associate. He had the look of a man who had been told repeatedly that the case was manageable, and who had, at some point in the last 72 hours, stopped fully believing it. Patricia Vogt was not present. I noticed that immediately, and I noted it without surprise. Sybil presented the motion to discharge with the economy of someone who is right and knows it, and doesn't need to perform. She placed 3 documents before the court: the Brightway Grounds contract, the signed partial lien waiver, and the Guilford County Register of Deeds filing timestamp. She walked through the arithmetic. Last documented work, March 14th. Lien filed July 18th. 126 days elapsed. Statutory deadline, 120 days. She presented the lien waiver argument. Tad Crenshaw had signed a partial lien waiver on the date he received the $11,000 progress payment, explicitly releasing all lien rights for work and materials furnished as of that date. The lien filed covered work that was, by Brightway's own written admission, not yet performed at the time of filing. She cited 2 supporting appellate decisions. She took 11 minutes. She sat down. Phipps argued the amended lien, the April 4th sod delivery, the clock restart theory. The judge asked him what the dollar value of the April 4th delivery was. He said $340. She asked him what the total lien claim was. He said $31,000. She asked him to explain the relationship between those 2 numbers. He did not have a clean answer. She asked him to address the partial lien waiver. He argued that it covered only completed work and not anticipated future performance. She asked him whether Brightway Grounds had performed the anticipated future work. He said no. She asked if he could point to a case in this jurisdiction, holding that a contractor may file a lien for work they were contracted to do, but did not complete. There was a pause in that courtroom that had physical weight, the kind of silence that settles into a room and stays there. Phipps said he would need to brief the issue. The judge said she had already reviewed the applicable case law and did not require additional briefing. She granted the motion to discharge. All liens against all individual homeowner properties in Millbrook Crossing, every single one, declared void. Ordered discharge from the Guilford County Register of Deeds. The court made a specific written finding that the lien was filed against properties where no direct improvement occurred, and that the partial lien waiver constituted a contractual release of lien rights for all completed work. And then, from the bench, the judge noted that the pattern of Brightway Grounds lien filings across multiple subdivisions in the region may warrant review by the North Carolina Licensing Board for General Contractors. She ordered a copy of the ruling sent to that office. She did not say the word fraud. She didn't need to. The silence where that word would have gone was loud enough for everyone in the room to hear it. Rhett exhaled. Carolyn pressed her hand flat on the gallery railing. Jerome was already pulling up the Register of Deeds portal on his phone to watch the discharge get recorded in real time. I sat still for a moment. Then I shook Sybil's hand. Outside on the courthouse steps, the WFMY reporter caught me in the afternoon sun, warm on the stone. Somebody's radio 2 blocks over, drifting through the fall air. I said, into the camera, "Homeowners need to know they have rights. The process works, if you're willing to work it." 2 weeks later, the North Carolina HOA Ombudsman issued a formal finding that Patricia Vogt had violated Chapter 47F by failing to disclose the liens within the required time frame, and that her unilateral special assessment negotiations violated the community's bylaws. The recording Rhett had made was cited in the report. Patricia Vogt resigned as HOA board president on a Thursday afternoon. 3 sentences, sent by email. 6 weeks after the court ruling, the special board election was held in the Millbrook Crossing clubhouse. Someone had set up folding chairs in rows. Someone else had brought 2 sheet cakes from the Food Lion on Battleground Avenue. The room smelled like sugar frosting, and the particular warmth of a lot of people gathered together on a cold November evening, coats still on, breath still visible near the door. Carolyn Dupree was elected board president. Vote of 189 to 12. She accepted from a folding table, reading glasses on, yellow legal pad already in front of her. She said she had 3 priorities. First, a full financial audit of HOA accounts for the past 6 years. Second, a competitive bidding requirement for all contracts above $5,000. Third, a homeowner transparency portal. All contracts, payments, and board meeting minutes posted publicly within 72 hours of completion. The room applauded. Not stadium applause. The steady, sincere kind. The sound of people who live next to each other and feel, for the first time in a long time, like someone is actually looking out for them. My daughter's wedding happened in April. A venue outside Greensboro, dogwood trees just coming into bloom. The kind of pale pink that only lasts about a week and means you timed it right. Jerome was there. Sybil was there. Carolyn and Rhett were both there. Rhett in an actual tie, which I will remember for the rest of my life. After dinner, I stepped outside for a few minutes and stood in the parking lot, gravel shifting softly underfoot, and looked up at a sky thick with stars. I'm not a sentimental man, but I'm a grateful one. As for the others, Brightway Grounds LLC had its contractor's license placed on probationary status by the North Carolina Licensing Board for General Contractors, pending a full audit of their lien history across 5 subdivisions. August Phipps received no formal sanction, but the court's written ruling is a public document and will appear in any search of his name attached to this case. Tad Crenshaw has not filed a mechanics lien in Guilford or Forsyth County since, and Patricia Vogt moved to a neighboring county within the year. As far as anyone in Millbrook Crossing knows, she has not served on another HOA board. Rhett ran into her at a Costco about 18 months later. He told me she looked at the floor and pushed her cart in the other direction. At Carolyn's first official board meeting, she proposed the establishment of a community legal defense fund. $50 per household, one-time voluntary contribution. Seed money for any future legal challenges to improperly filed liens or HOA overreach. The fund raised $9,200 in the first month. 3 other subdivisions in Guilford County reached out to Carolyn asking how they did it. She put together a 2-page guide and sent it free to anyone who asked. I contributed an additional $500 to the fund and asked that a portion be used each year to fund a small scholarship, $250, for a graduating senior from the local high school who writes the best essay about community civic engagement. The first recipient was a 17-year-old girl from the neighborhood who wrote about watching her father read the HOA contract the day they moved in. She wrote that she used to think legal documents were for lawyers. Now she thinks they're for anyone willing to sit down and pay attention. She's right.
So that's how it ended. A lien filed by a contractor who never touched my property, killed in a single court hearing. Patricia was resigns at board president shortly after, and the document that ended all of it. Her own HOA had signed it before Lien was ever fired. She just forgot it existed. Here's what I want you to take away from this. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a retired pipefitter. But I learned a long time ago on job sites. In shutdown plants, reading safety manuals nobody else bothers with, that's the fine print is where people either protect themselves or get destroyed. Patricia had power. She had a title, a board majority, and 6 years of running that neighborhood like it was hers. What she didn't have was an answer for a Lien waiver sitting in her own files. She never reads her own paperwork carefully enough. I read mine. Every word. Every day. Every signature. That's the whole story. And look, I know some of you are dealing with something right now. A fight that doesn't add up. A letter that feels wrong. A board that acts like the rules only apply to you. Don't argue at the meeting. Don't react. Go home. Read every document they ever sent you. And read it like your house depends on it. Because sometimes it does. If your HOA has ever put something like this, drop it in the comments. Share this with anyone who needs it. Subscribe because the next story, even worse, and the homeowner won anyway.